It's 4 AM in Aswan. It'll take us 3.5 hours to drive through the desert to arrive at Abu Simbel. We'll be 1,500 kilometers from Cairo, but only 45 kilometers as the crow flies from the current border with Sudan. At the time of Ramses, the Egyptian Empire reached as far as where Khartoum is today. That's 700 kilometers further south. As you know, the temples are no longer in their original location. I explained in my previous video how they were moved 65 meters higher and 200 meters back from the river, which is now Lake Nasser. At the beginning of the 19th century, the two cave temples were almost covered in sand. It was the Venetian explorer and Egyptologist Belzoni who was the first to enter on August 1, 1817. The expedition was financed by the Consul General of Great Britain, Henry Salt. But it was really Champollion's expedition that made the temples of Ibn Simbel, as they were known at the time, famous. As planned, we arrive at Abu Simbel at 7:30 AM. Nice surprise, a hawk circles over our heads. There is no doubt that we're being welcomed by the god Horus himself. Ramses II launched the construction of these temples in the first years of his reign, which started in 1279 BC. They were dug into two neighbouring rocky hills, Ibshek and Mea, which dominated the left bank of the Nile. But why choose a place so far from Thebes, the capital, and the royal residence of the Delta? The main reason is linked to three concurrent events occurring around July the 18th. The star Sirius reappears in the sky after 70 days of absence. Just a few moments before, and very close to the point where the sun is going to rise. At the same time, the flood brought to Egypt the black silt essential to fertilize the earth. This triple phenomenon constituted the miracle of New Year's Day. The rites celebrated in the caves of Ibshek and Mea were to maintain the regularity and abundance of flooding of the Nile, and at the same time celebrating the power of the pharaoh. The king thus fulfilled the most sacred duty, maintaining Ma'at, that is to say, order and balance of the world. The temples also had a political and economic purpose. We will start by visiting the great temple of Ramses II. It's what we call the speos, meaning that instead of being built, it was entirely dug out and sculptured into the mountain. The statues were cut into the rock. Thousands of cubic meters of sandstone were evacuated by thousands of workers, who had no room for error. The sanctuary is preceded by an esplanade, then a ramp leads to the terrace. With its trapeze shape, the facade evokes the pylons of classical temples. We feel overwhelmed by the power emanating from these four 20-meter-high statues. They all represent Ramses II on his throne, looking towards the rising sun. He wears all the attributes of the pharaoh: the double crown, the royal veil, protective cobra, the artificial beard tied behind his ears, and the front loincloth. Next to and between the legs of Ramses II, we see 12 smaller statues. For the first time, a pharaoh is depicted with his family. To the left of the front door, his first wife, his mother, his eldest daughters, his eldest son, and perhaps a granddaughter. that the two girls became great royal wives by marrying their father after the death of Nefertari. To the right of the entrance, his first wife, his mother, his second son, and 3 daughters. Meritamen and Baketmut also became great royal wives by marrying Ramses II. Talking of children, it's a very small sample, since Ramses II had more than 100. When the temple was moved, each block was repositioned in its original place, including, of course, the part of the Colossus that had collapsed. It's not certain the cause or date of this collapse. The most common thesis is that of an earthquake which occurred during the lifetime of Ramses II. Before the staircase, 2 steles face each other. They show scenes of offerings by Ramses II to various gods. Another stele easily goes unnoticed, to the point that I've got no photos to show you, but since it's always mentioned in the descriptions of Abu Simbel, I will tell you about it anyway. It commemorates the union of Ramses II with the daughter of the Hittite king in the year 34 of his reign. After a long war between the two peoples, this marriage sealed the Treaty of Peace, an alliance between the Egyptian and the Hittite empires. On either side of the terrace there are 2 chapels closed to the public. On the south side a chapel dedicated to Tot, and the north side a chapel dedicated to Ra. The balustrade of the terrace is decorated with Osirian statues of Ramses, alternating with statues of the god Horus. The 4 colossi rest on a single pedestal. 2 carvings of the priest Imhotep present a double text in which we recognize the cartouche of Ramses. In a niche above the entrance door, Ra-Hoakti comes out of the mountain holding in his hands the user scepter and the goddess Mat. This cryptogram gives the crowning name of Ramses, Uzer Mat Ra, which means for historians that Ramses identifies himself with the sun god. The corniche is carved with baboons greeting the rising sun. In the passageway we see the traditional representation of prisoners of war. Here the Nubians, on the other side the Asians, also chained and on their knees. Their elbows are tied behind their backs, their ties pass around their necks and are finished with papyrus for the Asians and lotuses for the Nubians. Above the prisoners, before the entrance door, 2 identical Sematawi scenes face each other. The double god of the Nile, Hapi, ties together the 2 emblematic plants of Upper and Lower Egypt. The god on the left represents Lower Egypt with its papyrus, and the one on the right, Upper Egypt, with the lotuses. The temple was inaugurated around 1260 BC, but not the slightest trace of its gigantic construction site has been found. It's dedicated to the great god of the empire Amun-Ra, the sun god Ra-Hoakti, and the god Ptah. However, it's almost entirely dedicated to the glory of Ramses II. These 8 pillars are 10 meters high and the statues 8 meters, and everything was sculpted by digging into the rock mass of the cliff. The first hypostyle room plays the role of a first courtyard of an open-air temple. Between the walls and the pillars, a passage allows you to go round it. On the ceiling, The vulture Nekhbet, goddess of Upper Egypt, protects the royal path. These 8 statues of Ramses II are called Osirian because he is represented in the style of Osiris. That is, his arms are crossed on his chest and his hands are holding the Osirian insignia, the hecacepter and the flagellum. But he is not wrapped in a shroud like Osiris, the god of the dead. Ramses is represented as a living god. We can see it by his pleated loincloth and his bare torso and legs. The 4 colossi on the left, that is to say to the south, wear the white crown of Upper Egypt. Opposite, they wear the pshent, the double crown of unified Egypt, which Osiris never wears. The other sides of each pillar are covered with scenes of offerings from the king to different deities. Between the 3rd and the 4th pillars on the south side, on a 3-metre high wall, there is a stele on which is engraved a text called the Decree of Ptah. The god addresses the king by telling him that he is his father and sings his praises. It evokes the victories of Ramses and the arrival of the Hittite princess destined to become his royal wife. Here are the scenes which decorate the 4 sides of the first hypostyle room. They are entirely devoted to the exploits of the pharaoh in his role as protector of the country. The south and north walls show war scenes. On the east wall, we find the usual scenes of massacre of enemies usually engraved on the pylon of a temple. On the back wall, Ramses leads his captives before the gods. Under the protection of Nekhbet, Ramses II massacres his enemies. To the right of the captives, but hidden by the pillar, Ra-Horakhti hands a sword to the pharaoh. We only see 6 in this photo, but the first 9 daughters of Ramses are represented in the bottom register. The scene repeats itself on the other side of the front door, but it is Amun-Ra who hands the sword to Ramses II. The Khopesh is an Egyptian sword of Hyksos origin commonly used in the New Kingdom. Ramses II would have been the first pharaoh to have adopted it in times of war. Here, the first 8 sons of the king are represented in the order of birth. The king presents his Nubian prisoners as offerings to a divine triad, Amon, deified Ramses II, and Mut. The god grants the king various blessings. The text above the prisoners indicates that they will work in the workshops of the Temple of Amun. On the other side is the same scene, but this time in front of Ra-Horakhti. Over 70 meters long, the north wall is engraved with scenes like a comic strip. It relates an episode of the conflict which opposed the Egyptians and the Hittite empires for several decades. At the beginning of the 13th century BC, the situation became explosive between the 2 powers. 5 years after the start of his reign, the young pharaoh Ramses II decided to retake the city of Kadesh, which had escaped the control of his father Seti I.
In 1274, Muwatalli and Ramses both led their armies.
The Battle of Kadesh is considered by historians to be the greatest battle of antiquity and the greatest chariot battle in history.
Experienced professionals known as menfit would form chariots. In contrast to the vehicles of their Egyptian enemies,
if you want to know more about this warlike episode, watch the video dedicated to it on the YouTube channel Kings and Generals. I will put the channel link in my end credits. But the most important thing for me is the way that Ramses II rewrote history. Under the direction of the pharaoh, this battle was a great, glorious success, represented on numerous temples and documents. In fact, as we now know, it ended in a draw, or even a half defeat for the Egyptians. Ramses did not recapture Kadesh, but in his version of the battle gave it a divine status. In human history, this is the first example of propaganda orchestrated by those in power. On the lower register of the south wall, Ramses II sets out to attack a Syrian fortress. Behind him, his three eldest sons also charge on their chariots. Another very spectacular scene on this wall, the king tramples a Libyan enemy and prepares to pierce the chest of another. Ramses II, triumphant on his chariot, pushes Nubian prisoners chained by the neck in front of him. A squire walks in front carrying the king's sandals. His tame lion gallops under his horse. We're now going to see the second hypostyle room, so follow me. It's smaller than the first, approximately 12 meters wide by 7 meters deep. Its 4 pillars are decorated with scenes of the king with a deity, all different except Hathor and Mut, who are represented twice. They all depict gestures of affection or protection from the gods and goddesses towards Ramses II. The king wears different crowns and clothes from one scene to another. The south and west walls are the best preserved. On the south wall, the boat of Amun-Ra with the head of a ram is carried in procession by 19 figures. In front of the boat, the king holds the incense burner and the secum scepter. The queen shakes a sistrum, a sacred instrument of ancient Egypt. It was used during dances and religious ceremonies, particularly those dedicated to the goddess Hathor. Sistrums were shaken to control the floods of the Nile and to keep Set away. On the south wall, Ramses II offers a bouquet of lotuses and papyrus to 3 deities, Amun-Ra, himself deified, and Mut. Originally, Mut was seated. The sculptor moved her to make room for Ramses II. We can still see the traces of her chair through her silhouette, and her feet have not been erased. The second version shows her behind, standing. In fact, each time the deified Ramses is represented in the middle of the triad, he has been added later. No matter how much I searched, I couldn't find any explanation for this oddity. On the east side of the north wall, Ramses II offers food to the god Min, followed by the deified Ramses II and Isis. 3 openings give access to the vestibule, a sort of antechamber before the sanctuary. The vestibule is a very wide room, since it's as wide as the rest of the temple, but only measures 3 meters 50 deep. It's entirely decorated with scenes of offerings. The west wall is pierced by 3 doors. The middle one opens onto the sanctuary, and the other 2 onto rooms which are not decorated and close to the public. We are in the front of the most sacred place of the temple, the sanctuary or naos. It's also the one which preserves the strongest message that Ramses wanted to leave to posterity. These 4 statues, carved into the rock, represent 4 gods. 3 of them are the most important in the Egyptian pantheon, and the 4th is the self-proclaimed god Ramses. Today, the statues are constantly illuminated by artificial light, but for millennia they remained in darkness. Except 2 days a year, February the 21st and October the 21st. On these 2 days, the sun's rays penetrate the depths of the temple over 50 meters and eliminate 3 solar gods. Ptah, who is not one, was deliberately kept in the shadows. Since the temple was moved, the phenomenon now occurs on February the 22nd and October the 22nd. The secret of this event was rediscovered in 1874. Since then, of course, the secret has been widely spread. On the north wall, Ramses incenses the boat of Ra. And on the south wall, the boat of Amun. We'll cross the second hypostyle room to find ourselves in the first pillared room. 4 openings lead to traversal chambers called treasure rooms. On the left part of the back wall, the door gives access to a rectangular room. From this room you can enter 2 rooms that are much longer than they are wide, with low ceilings and very poorly lit. It has been speculated that the royal treasures may have been hidden there, hence the name treasure rooms. In fact, they were to serve as a sacristy and to store objects of worship and the boat. The walls are covered with scenes where the king, kneeling before a god, makes offerings of ewers, fabrics, incense, wine and even food. The east room is pierced by 8 niches which must have contained objects of worship or statues. Like the west room, a bench surrounds 3 sides and it is very poorly lit. Only the west wall is decorated with offering scenes. There are symmetrical rooms on the northwest side of the temple to the right of the hypostyle room. But 2 other rooms, through which one enters directly from the pillared room, were added later. We can see very clearly that the Battle of Kadesh was already engraved on the wall when the doors were pierced, since they destroyed part of the relief. As in the southern rooms of the treasury, those to the north reproduce on their walls a whole set of scenes which place the king in the presence of divinities. Most often Ramses II is kneeling, and occasionally standing. He faces goddesses or gods sitting on their thrones. A certain number of Nubian deities are in the spotlight here, but there is also a more classic pantheon represented in particularly by Ra-Horakhti, Ammon, Mut, Khonsu, Ptah, Tot, Isis and a few others. We are now going to leave the temple, but first I would like to show you a reconstruction of the monument as it must have been in the times of Ramses. I took these images from a program broadcast on RMC Story last December. Let's now visit the second temple Speos, which Ramses II made for Nefertari. He was his first great wife and the love of his life. It's the only religious building built for a pharaoh's wife. It too was dug into the mountain, but it's smaller than the Temple of Ramses. It is dedicated to the goddess Hathor and her supreme representative, the great royal wife. Nefertari is elevated to the function of the feminine principle of a god, also called a consort. For example, Amon's consort is the goddess Mut. Ramses, as a god, confirms Nefertari, for whom the sun rises, as his consort. As wife of the god, she assists the king in all royal and religious functions. Mistress of Upper and Lower Egypt, lady of charm, sweet in love, rich in praise, beautiful in face, the most sublime epithets were used to qualify her. Let's move closer to the facade. As you can see, it also imitates the shape of the pylon of classical temples. On either side of the door, two statues of Ramses II frame a statue of Nefertari. And of course, they all face the rising sun. The Colossus, who seems to guard the door, is wearing the pshent, but the one on the other side of the Queen wears the crown of Ptah Tatanen. The Queen carries a mortar from which two horns surround the solar disk and two raptor feathers. Two uraeus are carved on the headband, one for Udjet and the other for Nekbet. Against her chest, she holds the Hathoric sistrum. At the feet of the king stands two of his sons, and at the feet of the queen, two daughters. To the left of the door, we see the same characters, but Ramses is wearing a white mitre of the south. Look closely at the statue furthest to the left. It's larger than the others. It measures 8 meters 40 or 16 cubits of Egyptian measurements. 16 cubits is the height of the most favourable flood. The statue therefore evokes the flood king arriving from the south. The text written to the right of the queen says that this temple is a great monument for her. In the rock, 4 steles have been engraved. On the first, the viceroy of Nubia, Ioni, stands before Ramses with a flabellum. Ioni had supervised the construction of Abu Simbel at the beginning of Ramses II's reign. On the next, the first royal cupbearer, Ramses Asha Hased, stands before the king. His name means wishing many said festivals. The other 2 steles are less well preserved. Above the entrance door, 4 columns of hieroglyphs recall the names of the 2 colossi surrounding the door. On the lintel, Amun-Ra and Horus of Mea are represented back to back seated on thrones. On the left, Ramses II offers 2 vases of wine to Amon. On the right, he burns incense in front of Horus. On the uprights, texts praising Ramses II are engraved. Of course, the dimensions are much more modest than those of the Great Temple. At first glance, we see that the decoration of the pillared room is more delicate than that of the large temple. The pillars immediately attract attention because the design and colour are still well preserved. A curious light, slightly yellow colouring predominates. Perhaps it's an allusion to sunlight, or to Hathor's nickname, the Golden One. A Hathoric Naos sistrum is carved on the face of the pillars facing the interior of the room. We also see 3 columns of hieroglyphics. The other faces mainly represent gods and goddesses, but we also see Ramses II and Nefertari. As for Ramses, you'll have to take my word for it, because I don't have any photos to show you. Exactly as in the Great Temple, the east wall on each side of the entrance door is decorated with scenes of the massacres of the enemies. The difference being that in this temple the Queen is present. Now let's discover the south side wall. It has 4 scenes. On the east side, Ramses II stands in front of Hathor. He wears the crown of Ptah Tatanen. The goddess hands him the Menat necklace and in her left hand holds the rod of the million years. Set of Ombos and Horus of Mena crown the king. Set gives him eternal life, power and health. Horus promises him the years of Atum. They both hold rods of millions of years. Nefertari offers papyrus and the sistrum naos to Anuket. The goddess gives her eternal life, prosperity, health and joy. Ramses II, wearing the kepresh, makes the offerings of Ma'at to Amun-Ra. The god promises him bravery and complete victory. The north wall is also decorated with 4 offering scenes. Near the gate, Ramses blesses offerings before Ptah, who holds in his hand the 3 royal scepters. The text says that Ptah will give them to Ramses. Ramses offers 2 bouquets of papyrus and 3 vases to the god Harishaf. In this scene, he gives the king eternal life, power, health and joy. Queen Nefertari shakes 2 sistrum naos to please the heart of Hathor. Satisfied, the goddess gives her eternal life, stability, power and health. The last scene of the north wall, Ramses II offers 2 wine vases to Ra-Horakhti. He gives the king eternal life, stability, power, bravery, victory and health. On the west side, a door opens onto the antechamber. Each side shows a scene of offerings from Nefertari. On the door uprights, Ramses invites you to enter. The antechamber is only 2.5 meters deep. On the lintel, the cartouche of Nefertari is placed on the sign of gold. It is surrounded on either side by the goddess Nekhbet, spreading her wings in protection. Ramses II presents 2 bouquets composed of papyrus and flowers to the goddess Hathor, represented in the form of a cow on her boat navigating among the papyrus. This time, it is Nefertari who presents 2 bouquets composed of papyrus to the goddess Hathor. In this scene, Ramses and Nefertari offer flowers together to the goddess Nauhochet. Here she has the appearance of Hathor, but she is most often depicted in the form of a hippopotamus. In a scene symmetrical to that on the south side with Ammon, Ramses II presents 2 vases of wine to Ra-Horakhti. Nefertari offers flowers and food to the triad of Elephantine. The queen is crowned by Isis and Hathor of Ebshek. This honour is usually reserved for kings. Thus, Ramses II shows by this scene all the affection he has for his wife, putting her on an equal footing with himself. Finally, let's see the sanctuary. It's a small room, 2 meters 70 wide and 2 meters 40 long, which is not in very good condition. We can barely make out Hathor in her cow form, but she comes out of the rock from which she was carved, holding before her Ramses II. It appears as in the naos, supported by 2 Hathoric pillars. On each side we see scenes of offerings. The visit is over and we will now return to Aswan. But before we leave, I would like to show you an astonishing secret place, which we could call the other side of the decor. This is what sits above our heads when we walk around the great Temple of Ramses, since it was moved here in 1968. At Abu Simbel, modern engineers have shown themselves to be worthy heirs of those of Ramses II. The visit is now over. I'll meet you next in Luxor.